guys, welcome to another episode of Unlocking the Secrets to Expanding Human Potential. Michael, I'm nearly getting that right after a few of these, right? So
we'll get there, mate. Wait till we hit double digits.
Welcome to my co-host, Michael McNair, and we have this is one I've been trying to avoid since we started, haven't I, Michael?
Avoid? Oh, no way. We've been looking forward to this
because it's down a rabbit hole. And it really is plant medicine 101, because for people out there who don't know, that there's amazing healing properties through plant medicine, and we have, I would think, Australia, if not one of the world's foremost experts in plant medicine across the whole book. And apart from being good at that, he's a bloody good bloke as well too. So Julian Palmer, welcome to our podcast.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So let's just start off with a bit about how did you get into this, and what's your backstory to all this stuff? And because I know how I got into it, and thank God I did. But how did you find this?
Well, people ask me that often. I mean, I heard about DMT in the mid-90s. I think I heard Terence McKenna.
Can you stop there? Sorry. So what's DMT for the people who don't know?
Oh, okay. So
right.
DMT is N,N-dimethyltryptamine, and it's a very powerful psychedelic that you smoke and lasts like 5-10 minutes. So Terence McKenna in the mid-90s was one of the main proponents of DMT. And I heard him on the radio, and he has this most hypnotizing voice. And I recommend to everyone, just download, he's probably got thousands of hours of talks. Download all these talks, listen to all of them. We're great for long road trips. It's an incredibly entertaining speaker. So I was intrigued about DMT. And I fairly precocious. I've been writing since I was 14. I've been writing philosophy, and I gave a talk in the Byron Shire, where I was living at the time, in 1999. And the guy whose venue we had the talk at, maybe like 7 people came along, and then there were 2 people left. And one of them said, the voices said we should smoke DMT. And I was like, oh, DMT, I heard of that. I want to do that.
All right, I'm in.
So the guy who did it before me, he was a young guy, kind of a yogic guy, and he did it and, smoked it. And then, 5 minutes later, he comes out and says, yep, reality, it's all an illusion. And, nothing, it didn't look like anything much happened to him in the space. When I did it, and it's quite difficult to smoke. And the guy who gave it to me, he later became my best friend. He didn't know how to give it to people properly. And I didn't have that much, but I laughed and I put my fingers in my eyeballs, and I could see all these colors and have this intonation of beings and these swirling colors and this sort of realization of something profound. And I was, it wasn't like at that moment I was hooked, but definitely over the next week, I had an experience where I felt like my pineal gland had been opened up, and everything was brighter and clearer. And then I think a little bit later, my gig in IT working, which was very early, 1999, I was working in web design. It was very early days. And me and my friend, we were designing like websites for ISPs and really doing some, if you're a real pioneer, you're in the mid-90s. And I was, but, at this point, we were doing quite a lot of pioneering stuff. And he ended up marrying an Icelandic lady, going to Iceland. and I did Vipassana. And I found a psilocybin mushroom on day 1 and day 3 and day 5.
Of course you did.
And took it, and it definitely amplified my meditation experience. So after that, I basically, the message I got was like, so you have a new job now, and this is these plants, these psychedelics. So I just started doing that full time. And I'd say from like mid 99 till about somewhere around early 2003, I was often taking something 2-3 times a week. I was maybe taking Syrian ruin acacia, which is like an analog to ayahuasca. I was taking something like once a week. So I was going through all these initiations, understandings, and doing all this research. And then I started sharing it with people. So yeah, the job, you know, the job, it's kind of snowballed, you know.
So was there any hesitation, or was it just curiosity, or you kind of just felt like you'd fallen onto your path and it was felt like a natural thing to do?
I felt like I found a really profound avenue for awakening. And I was on fire. And I had done preparation beforehand, and I'd done a lot of reading about mystical states and you know, cleansing the body, cleansing the mind, cleansing the emotional body. So I had this attitude of like purifying the vessel in a way. So by the time I got to psychedelics, I was able to go fairly deep into it and really understand the territory, and you know, felt it transform, you know, the very fibers of my being, you know, transform me in a fundamental way. You know, I would look, if I didn't take psychedelics, I would look like a completely different person. I'd probably look like a sort of decrepit, sad person if I never taken anything. You know, I can't imagine that reality. I wouldn't be very happy. I wouldn't be the person I am now, that's for sure.
So why for the novice, you know, why would you do? And look, we're not promoting doing it and all that kind of stuff. In Australia, it's illegal and all that kind of stuff, right? But let's just say someone's looking into it. You know, why would you do it, Julian? And just for the people who probably listen to this podcast or this YouTube video and know about DMT and have probably seen Terence McKenna's work, or seen DMT, the spirit molecule, or seen, there's another one, Reality of Truth, which is really good as well too. And they're thinking, oh, maybe I should, you know, why would you do it? What do you get out of it?
Well, I think, I mean, there's so many different psychoactives available, and I believe that they are like fundamental gifts in nature. Like I'm into all kinds of herbs and plants and teas and supplements and whatever. I mean, in terms of augmenting and aligning yourself to nature and really allowing yourself to come into balance and alignment. Like, I think that these tools are the mechanics that we have available to kind of like get a tune up, to really kind of deal with what's there, and you know, really get our vehicle ship shape. And like I was saying, I wouldn't it's not like there's that old adage related to psychedelics, when you get the message, hang up the phone. Yeah, to some degree, hang up the phone, but also, I consider these psychoactives to be super nutrients, and I consider them important in order to come to an optimal functioning, not like an optimal functioning in terms of mental acuity, though that can be a factor. It's more like optimal functioning as in like being clear of bullshit that's going to distract you away from your fullest possible spiritual evolution, I'd say. And yeah, I think they're the primary tool that nature has given us to really activate and become aware of who we are and what our potentials are. So, there's all this talk of, you should get there without psychedelics or what have you, but it's quite commonly observed that, for example, in the 1960s, the whole, for example, the Buddhist movement, which Rick Strassman talked about, almost all of those Buddhist people got started taking LSD. That's how they got started. It's without LSD, would there even be Western spirituality? Because in the 60s, people went, oh, there is actually something. It's not just it's not just all this material stuff.
Yeah. But without LSD, there would be
that's
no
important
Beatles as well too. So
that's right.
Sergeant Pepper at all.
No.
Yeah. So just from, sorry, Michael, you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I really agree with you. I think there's a really beautiful symbiosis that exists between humans and plants when we align fully. One of the questions that I've often thought about is, do they have an intention or a consciousness that acts independently of us or works, on its own at a whatever vibration, or are they neutral and we're somehow using it and tapping into it and creating some sort of I don't know, improvement mechanism or something that makes us function better? It's kind of, I guess I get caught up in this thought around, where's the story, where's the relationship? Is it the plants that are giving us the message, or are we somehow meant to use them to get to a higher point? Does that sort of make sense? I guess it's a bit of a download I've had.
Yeah. Well, it depends who you talk to, but you're talking to me, so I'll say that the iboga, like top neuroscientists try and understand how iboga works. And if someone like myself and most people who are into iboga, I don't know anyone who says, oh yeah, it's just it's just a hallucination. It's like, no, they all recognize that iboga is an ancient spirit that all the people in the iboga world, that spirit is their friend and mentor and teacher that they go back to and learn from, even in their daily life. So that's how I see it as well. And you wonder, like, I have had experiences with iboga. I'm like, actually, who's paying this guy? He's putting so much effort into this work. What's he getting paid? Because it definitely. Iboga people do question this, and people have wondered, like, what's it actually getting out of this? And it seems to be, one guy I know says it seems to be treasure hunting. Other people says that iboga eats dark energy.
I like that concept. Yeah, it's a fascinating thought process, I think, because then it sort of leads us on to natural versus the synthetic, and obviously the natural plants and the like. But then we know that there's equally all of these synthetic options for people to take. And for me, this is where the crossover, I guess, becomes plant medicine versus a psychedelic versus what people would call drugs and so forth.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Well, this is the thing, like when I was getting into this in the mid-noughties, there was a fair amount of research chemicals going around coming out of China, and they're not really coming out of China anymore. And the thing is, a lot of what we know as a psychedelic renaissance is people who have depression, who have anxiety, they're seeing all these scientific articles coming out going, wow, this really works. This really does the job. People really finding benefit from this. So, and then, you know, I know many people personally who've managed to dig themselves out of a massive hole that's been, you know, that they've been in their whole life, perhaps. So, you know, they become instant converts. Whereas you're not really having the flood of research chemicals or even substances like 2CB in the world today. But many people I know consider MDMA to be, you know, good pure MDMA, not just like party pills, to be completely valid medicine. But it's the context. Like if you take MDMA, go to a rave and you dance all night, it's a kind of like a waste, because you're not going to take advantage of the interpersonal realizations and the awareness that it gives you. Like if you have pure MDMA, there's no speed in it, for example. There's no hands in the air. It's like walking in the clouds with Lando Calrissian and Carrie Fisher. That's how I describe it.
You're talking Greg's language now.
You can actually, and you can realize things about yourself. You can use it for your own awareness, and you can understand deeper levels of empathy and you know, human connection, all that sort of stuff. So it's fantastic for relationships and also for people who have trauma. I know people who use it for psychotherapy for people, because they can talk about really traumatic stuff and process it, whereas you're not really able to touch it without taking MDMA. So I'd say, you know, there's also ketamine, which is, you know, powerful, taken intramuscular, but pretty much like all the other research chemicals and psychedelic chemicals, are not really so well utilized. There's been a little bit of a resurgence of the use of LSD, and Chris Bosch has come out with a fantastic book recently called, I think it's called Diamonds from Heaven, when he talks about taking 500 micrograms of LSD. I think it's over like 107 times or something ridiculous over a few decades, and really incredible cosmic experiences. So it's really brought about a resurgence of interest in LSD in that context. But in terms of other synthetic psychedelics, I mean, back in the mid-noughties, there was the DOC and 2CB and 2CB27 and the N-bombs and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, they're just not going to provide the same benefits. Like I have some friends who recently told me about, I think it's for ACO DMT, like a synthetic psilocybin. And they said, yeah, it's good when you take it, but the next day you feel like shit. And it's generally the synthetic's going to take something away from you. Yeah. And you take mushrooms or something, the next day you're going to feel fantastic. You know, they're going to give something to you. So there's a big difference, you know. Even with LSD, which is semi-synthetic, you're going to feel a bit seedy the next day. You know, it's not entirely, it doesn't mesh that great with the human biology.
You don't have that same cleansing aspect.
Well, you don't have the Terence McKenna would talk about the mushroom consciousness, the mushroom spirit you can communicate with. You have that to some, you can talk to something with LSD, but it's not an organic consciousness that moves through, that lives on many planets for billions and billions of years, 60, 70 years ago, what have you. So there's a big difference.
So with that, there's many types, and you've got your mushrooms, you've got your ayahuasca, you've got iboga, you got your toad, not really a plant, but it's a toad. What are the different types? And you got DMT versus 5-MeO DMT. What's the go with all that?
You've also got the cactus, which it hasn't been many studies on the cactus. Most people heard about peyote, which you can't really, people grow it in Australia, but they never take it because you need to wait 50 years to get one button. But you've got the cactus with mescaline in it, and the thing is, most people will take cactus, or they take a cactus brew, and they're not going to experience much because it's very gentle, which is actually a really good thing in terms of psychedelics, because they can be so powerful. They can be so rocket, super turbo fueled, like the toad. People smoking the venom from the Buffa alvarius toad, which has got 5-MeO DMT in it. Personally, I've done that twice, and I have no plans on doing it again. I smoked a lot of synthetic 5-MeO as well, and it's one of those things like really high dose DMT. Maybe do it once, it's in your life. It's all you need to do. That's the true case of when you get
funny thing is
hang up the phone.
That Michael and I had a chance to do 5-MeO last weekend, but I got told in the journey beforehand, you don't need to do it, which was interesting. Yeah, it just went. The mother ayahuasca just went. Yeah, you don't go there.
Yeah, it's a shocking. There's some shocking realizations there, and I went to the World Bufo Alvarius Congress in Mexico late last year, so you had a lot of the top 5-MeO toad people, and I think that a lot of people were using it to reach these really high spiritual states, but it becomes something they really rely on to, because it does take you to these states that are described in Eastern mysticism as samadhi. It does take you into these states where you meditate for a few hours every day for many years, and you have these states. My uncle was actually one of these people who's been I think he's been meditating 2 hours every day for 30 plus years. I don't believe he's ever had a samadhi experience, Yeah. So it's not guaranteed with meditation either, but I kind of question the value of the samadhi experience in the first place. It's like you don't even need to have that experience. It's like you're having a human experience, so just do that. There's no need for anything else.
Well, I can only say,
message.
What I've experienced is simply profound. Being in states of just complete oneness with everything, and coming back and going, nothing in life matters. Seriously. Everyone's just caught up in this stuff and everything, and it's some of the most amazing healing experiences that words are hard to describe. How healing and how it's like what happened. Like Julian, you said your pineal gland just shut. It was like someone went to my heart chakra and went bang, and just went boom, and then opened it all up and went, here's joy and here's happiness and here's love, and I went, holy crap. And it was just
That's the most, it feels like.
It was just a connection to everything. And, we were sitting out the back one night, and we were just looking at the stars going, it's just, and so we can still do fractals and all that stuff and going, reality doesn't even exist. Like we are a human consciousness having a
it's that realization though, isn't it, that the human experience is the gift. I think when you hit that point, that's when you realize, okay, it all starts to make sense. But because I mean, not worry is probably not the right word, but there's a lot of talk about the positive aspects to it, and should we be concerned that it's being painted as a bit of a panacea, that you can suddenly go on these psychedelic journeys or plant medicine journeys, and that your trauma will be magically healed, when we kind of know it sort of doesn't work that way. But sometimes these experiences, like what Greg's just mentioned, they're quite difficult to describe in words, because a lot of what you get is a feeling and an awakening of the senses and an awareness, which words don't typically do justice to very well. But sometimes the healing piece is the bit you do on your own for quite an extended period afterwards, as it all starts to process and work its way into your life. Is there a risk there that maybe we're not educating in the right way, or we're westernizing it a little bit too much?
There's so many issues involved in this realm right now, because what's happening is you've got a whole bunch of Westerners who are jumping right into this, who are having the kinds of experiences that Greg are having and lots of people are having, and they're going, right, well, this is it. You can, you speak to a lot of people who have done this over the years, and they find a way to have a kind of spiritual direct connection, awakening or processing. There's just a quantum level above anything else. I mean, it's way beyond any technique or meditation or anything in terms of like how quickly you can really process information and process emotions and stuff going on in your life and all that sort of thing. But like you were saying, the integration process is so crucial, and you can be in extended states of emotional, psychic, mental processing that can just keep going and go on and on and on, to the point where it seems all consuming, that you're really coming to terms with a lot of information. And for a lot of people, they've got a lot of stuff to process, a lot of nihilistic programs. They've got some dark things in their past. They've got some belief, and seeing the raw reality with new eyes can be really disturbing sometimes for people. It can plunge people into really deep, dark processes. And I was on SBS TV giving people ayahuasca, and I was asked, is it dangerous? Is ayahuasca dangerous, for example? And I said, well, even riding your bike on the road is dangerous. But I said that one of the main dangers is that people can be propelled into states that they do not feel that they're ready for. And that the states of processing involved can be very consuming and take up a lot of your CPU time, so that you can, it can take many, many years even to process one experience, actually. So
absolutely.
Yeah, it's such powerful tools. And I think in one sense, we're not really ready as a species for the tools. And I think that as a species, we can look forward to some quite hard lessons. But yeah, I think we need to look at it as learning, because we don't really know how to use them. And we're already seeing, someone like myself, I've been in this scene pretty much a couple of decades before it was really a scene. I mean, 20 years ago, there wasn't so much. There wasn't internet forums in Australia. There wasn't conferences in Australia. There were just, people, maybe some goal parties and stuff like that,
Would it be fair to say, though, as a species, we've regressed because we've moved away from, I guess, the indigenous practices that existed in so many parts of the world, and we got this sort of, Anglicizing of everything, that we've taken away the stories and what we would know locally as the dream time, and we've got a completely different narrative in place now about education and learning what it is to be part of a culture, that all of those indigenous practices that maybe were creating the rites of passage and putting us in touch with things that are beyond our physical human body have all been parked, but we're now just starting to seed it in little pockets, and it's starting to find its way back into conversation and society. And I suppose at a high level, I'm curious, is there actually a downside? And maybe this is just part of the relearning that we've got to go through, and there will be a little bit of pain along the way, but ultimately the outcome is, if the intention is all about love and awareness and growth, then ultimately we're all going to be better off. But we're kind of in this interesting phase at the moment where we're questioning where it fits and how it fits, and who gets to make the rules, and what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do, as opposed to maybe leaning on that experience that once existed.
Yeah, the scene is going a little bit crazy because we live in a capitalistic society. It's going towards, what's happening is you have all these I have all these venture capitalists adding me on LinkedIn and messaging me, and it's going a little bit crazy at scary. The moment. And you're seeing all these people who see all this potential and opportunity in the financial space, and who want to kind of like steer it and direct it this way and that way. And you have these kind of organizations who tend to predominate and, steer it this way or that way, and various kinds of authority figures,
the lobbying and agendas.
So all the stuff that happens when human beings come together, the politics, like politics comes from the word polis, which means like city state. So it's really just what we're having is this big, the psychedelic world, the entheogenic world, the plant medicine world. It's not just like one singular group of people. It's not like 20 subcultures. It's just everyone. It's not, there's pretty much no social demographic that's not in there. It's not represented. So it's kind of at this point, like everyone's going in there because they're found benefit in it. But also, you're having all these kind of political influences, and then you have a lot of people taking advantage of the space for money. I mean, I'd say maybe 80-90% of the facilitators are dodgy, who they're not coming from the right place. And that's unfortunate, but it's like, that's just how things are. I mean, if you, for example, if I try and find a good GP, for example, or a good acupuncturist or a good plumber or mechanic, I reckon probably 80-90% of them are dodgy as well. You find a good mechanic and you're like, wow, like the sun is shining. The Lord is happy with me. So it's a little bit like that. I would say, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it just represents humanity itself. Yeah, no, really, here's some, really. What's that?
Will was just worked on about integration. Like, we've been in some ceremonies where, and this is, if I was in this position, I'd be going to some people, hey mate, this is not about you taking 100 mils and trying to get yourself smashed every 3 weeks, right? You're not doing any integration, but the shaman's allowing it to happen where, for me, that's quite, hang on, this guy's just coming to get smashed and he's doing no integration whatsoever, yet you're allowing him to have journey after journey after journey. And it's like, any man with a nose can actually see the fact that this guy's somewhat addicted to the experience, but there's no, hey, you meant to integrate this for, what was the message you got out of it? Go away for 6 months to integrate and come back in 6 months. But it seems like you're saying before, a lot of people just using it as a bit of a cash cow or just to whatever their agenda is. And, you're seeing people just do it and do it and do it, but not integrating anything. And to me, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and a lot of it is your intention in the experience. A lot of how people are doing this is just furthering spiritual bypassing, because it's just about spiritual experiences. And you can have all these spiritual experiences where you're meeting Jesus and talking to aliens, but nothing gets shifted around in yourself. And I had this one guy come to my retreat in the Gulf of Carpentaria a couple of years ago. And he'd drunk with a whole bunch of different people, had many dozens of different experiences. But another friend said it's as if he'd never drunk ayahuasca before, because he'd never actually confronted his own shit. Because unfortunately, how it's marketed is it's marketed towards like, oh, let's have these beautiful spiritual experiences and where that represents a kind of spiritual bypassing. Whereas the agenda of the ayahuasca is fairly clear. If you let the ayahuasca do what it wants to do, which a lot of people are not really letting it doing what it wants to do. It comes back to the human desire to control. And a lot of what's going on, like I spent a lot of time in Brazil drinking with these churches, they're all about control. They're all about religion. And it's like, wait on, what's religion got to do with this? This is the whole point of this. Is not about religion, but they make it about religion, right?
Impermanence, letting go.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but you have a lot of the human inclination is to structure and control and predetermine, and rather than surrender and let go into what the plant's intelligence to what it really wants. So all these people have all these kind of wacky ideas and understandings, and they're all there. A lot of these facilitators are doing it, but maybe often for not the right reasons. They're doing it because it is a control trip. They feel like they have some power and they want to determine the space and they want to, impose their version of reality onto other people or whatever. It can get awfully culty and strange. And, whenever I drunk with other people, like, it's often not good. Like I said, maybe, 80, you meet the 10-20% of the ones who are actually cool, and it's like, oh yeah, great, it's great to meet you, because it's often you just shaking your head.
And we've heard some horror stories, and when you said that word there, just I remember going to one ceremony and I just thought, I'm not going to go with the intention, I'm just going to go in with, just do what you want to me. Worst thing I ever did. Worst thing ever, because they just did what I wanted to, and it was great. But it's funny how the different experience, like sometimes you get fractals and you get all these visuals and all that kind of stuff, and other times you just get no fractals, no visuals, no geometric shapes, straight into visions or leaving your body. It's so different every time. It's
It's that saying I have, mate. You get exactly what you need, but very rarely in the way that you expect it.
So what's, with ceremonies, and I know, and you've got a beautiful way that you do it, and I've just it's a great space that you hold. There's a lot of different theories out there as to what you should do. And I know, when Mike and I we did a bit, it was a bit ceremonial, but wasn't too structured. But what's your idea on, full structured ceremonies versus just rocking up and any pre-diet and stuff like that?
Well, a lot of it, like everything, is knowing what not to do. And like I said, a lot of people, they feel uncomfortable with this kind of pregnant spaciousness that you have, that unpredictability. And so they're trying to control it or determine it, which kinds of determine the space. So I feel that any structure will kind of like compromise what the plants want to do. So I always come back to the plants personally, whereas say in the Brazilian churches, yeah, the plants are part of it, but also they've got their own doctrine, for example, which is more important than the plants. So for me, yeah, it's really about allowing the most conducive set and setting, which is really mindset and the physical setting, the container, and enabling an orientation that the individual has. So they're going to be able to be prepared to meet what's there and work with it. So, I'm of the less is more school, but I have respect for some approaches which might involve like group psychotherapy on the spot with the whole group, which is something I've heard of some groups doing, and that I'm not personally into that myself, but very much I would say that the people who practice what they call traditional way is often not so relevant to Western people, because Western people have their own peculiar orientations and needs and wants. So I think Western people are only really figuring out what Western people want and need. People have this idea that people, for example, have been drinking ayahuasca in the Amazon to have spiritual visions and, personal healing for hundreds of years. But that's not the case. If you drink, I know people who drank with the tribal people, for example, the Shuar. Remember this one guy was telling me he drank with the Shuar in the Amazon. And they drink during the daytime all together, the whole tribe, and they just drink ayahuasca and celebrate being together in the Amazon, their home.
Yeah,
and they're not trying to heal anything. They're already fine. They're not trying to have visions. That's already something that door's open for them. They're just like, they use it to, as like we might use alcohol, So you've got all these ideas, all the ideas of structure and tradition. These are all Western ideas. The indigenous people are generally not into that. You have all these, on the other hand, I know people who trained with Shipibos, and they have all these ideas related to dieting with various plants and then channeling the spirits of the plants, and the spirits of the plants are doing the healing, and the healing is primarily what it's about, and that's their sport, the mestizo way within Amazon. It's like a kind of a game. It's like a sport. And a lot of it looks like what we would consider dark sorcery. But for them, it's just video games.
Yeah.
It was described to me many years ago that you know, they don't have video games in the jungle, and especially the old guys, you know, they're playing these video games with each other, where to us it looks like dark sorcery. And so a lot of people go there, they have all these illusions about, you know, Pocahontas shamans and Yoda figures. It's not like that at all. Like there's a real dark side to it. And, you know, Western people are, I think, really need to understand what they want and come to an apprehension about that. So I feel we have a real advantage in Australia because we have the acacia trees. And the acacia trees, I first started with the Syrian ruin acacia as like an oral DMT experience, an ayahuasca experience. So there was no tradition in that. I didn't, you know, I wasn't aligned to any tradition. So I was free to kind of like develop what made, you know, a kind of way that made sense to me. But, you know, you go to Peru and the Amazon, and for them, it's like, there's only one way and it's our way. You go to Brazil and the church, you drink with the churches, and you know, that this is the way you do it. And then you have all these facilitators, they're all arguing about my way is the best way and how he does it is wrong. And, you know, it's all, the whole thing's bullshit. I mean, there's something for everyone. At the end of the day, there's something for everyone. And really it's about the medicine. It's about the plants. It's not about like this, the
labels and the stories and the marketing and all the crap that goes with it.
Yeah. Because I know, like, before, so Michael and I, you know, we're down to probably, you know, 3 days, 4 days beforehand. We'll just go vegetarian, no salt, no sugar, no processed foods. Just because it makes you feel good as well too, right? So there's no real hard and fast. You know, you don't drink coffee, Michael, but I don't drink coffee either. But it's more of a personal thing, and like you're saying before, it's about what you want to do with it. And I think for me, it's like I like to have that clear body and that clear, you know, the body not have toxins in there before a ceremony. And for me, that, you know, that just feels right. But I know, Julian, you don't stick too close to diet either, do you?
No, I mean, in the Peruvian mestizo tradition, it's all about the diet.
Dieta,
and you're eating certain foods, which are pretty much like the foods you're eating as the foods you'd be eating in indigenous contexts, like no salt, no fat, no sugar, all that. And that's pretty much relevant if you're drinking over a month. But if you're just going to drink ayahuasca once or over a weekend, none of that's relevant. Ayahuasca doesn't care if you know, loading up on McDonald's. Ayahuasca's still going to work for you. I mean, I say to people, look, you're all mature adults. You know what healthy food is, hopefully. And if you don't, that's your problem. I'm not your dietitian coach, you know. And a lot of people will go into extremes. They'll go on these, like, you know, brown rice diets for a month beforehand. And maybe it's good for you. Maybe it's not. I mean, but, you know, that's probably extreme. Probably, my opinion, you probably should be eating healthily now. And if you're not, like, that's something you maybe need to look at. You know, that's how you don't special diet. You shouldn't be eating a special diet. You should be eating like food that's optimal for you now. You know,
there might be the insight you get on night number one. Start looking after your body.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have the plants tell them, oh, you know, you should become a vegetarian, and other times tell people you should start eating meat. You know, it's all different for everyone. You know,
and that's why. And the thing that the number one question, which is hard to explain to people, is once you have a journey, the question is, what was it like? And it's like, well, that's really hard to say, because, you know, it's really hard to put into words an experience that's nonverbal, and it's just a completely, you know, different. And as I said in my post the other day, you know, I went through and spent hours creating this, you know, 6 hour playlist of all these songs, only to realize an hour into the ceremony, the journey Michael and I were doing, the music was playing wasn't on my playlist you know, it was a completely different reality I was in that was actually having music being played to me. And I was pennies dropped and going, this is the most amazing music and healing. I didn't pick this. This is not on my playlist. And Michael tried to search for it. It was one of the most funny things to think, oh, geez, what's going on here? But yeah, it's hard to explain. People kind of say, what can you tell me what happens? And it's like, well, it's hard. It really is.
Mm.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's one of these things that you know, probably more and more. It's, you know, it's like back in the 60s, you know, they at Harvard University in Tim Leary days, they'd say you'd kind of look at someone, you know, from across the room or whatever, and you look into their eyes and you knew that they knew, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's increasingly like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So
sure.
why do you think it's illegal? Why do you? What's your idea?
It's just bureaucracy. It's not actually based on. A lot of people will tell you it's not based on evidence. For example, it's not based on the science. For example, like David Nutt was sacked for saying that MDMA was safer than alcohol. It's like, that's a scientific fact, you know. That was in Britain. So it's not based on science. I think it's based on that you know, I think there's all these kind of social kind of, for example, there's taboos. We talk about, say, MDMA or ecstasy. There, you know, there's a basic kind of taboo against having fun or having pleasure. You know, like the Americans tried to ban alcohol. And, you know, even now it's not that easy to buy alcohol in America. And I think a lot of that's based on its kind of disinhibiting factor. So there's these taboos against having fun, against what drugs represent on that kind of like drug level. In terms of psychedelics, I think what happened in the late 60s was such upheaval that what happened, it all really happened in America in the late 60s. And you had people like Timothy Leary, and you had Woodstock, and you had all these people realizing they were, you know, living their lives, going to university, and they were going to work in their dad's accountancy firm, and they were a normal person. And then suddenly they grew their hair out and listened to all this crazy music and dropped out of society and had all these different viewpoints. So it really did rattle the establishment. And I think probably, say, in the East Coast and West Coast, that pretty much everyone would have had an understanding or direct awareness of a revolution that was going on. Like, I talked to my dad about it recently. He read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. And he said, look, he said, even though he didn't take LSD in the 60s, he said he saw it for himself, the shifts that were going on, the profound shifts that were going on in that time. And I think it rattled the establishment because, you know, and then, you know, a lot of things came out of that, like the environmental movement, the peace movement. Suddenly people didn't want to go to war. They didn't want to fight. And so the establishment was like, all right, we've got to stop this. We've got to clamp down on this. We can't have people, you know, really waking up to their, to you know, not wanting to fight the enemy, you know. So especially in America.
Enemy, hey?
And so America really spearheaded these drug laws that we have now, and they enforced them, and basically forced at gunpoint. They said to every country, look, you abide by these laws or we're not going to trade with you. So that's why I think it was 1972, the Psychotropic Convention on Drugs. So that's when LSD and DMT became illegal in pretty much every country in the world. So it's not so easy for countries just to kind of like, you know, take those drugs off the list. Though I know people in Australia who say, look, I know people who try to take it to the, you know, try to get arrested, try to take it to the Supreme Court, the High Court. The judges don't want to go there. They just throw it out of court because they know that there's no real legs to stand on. There's no reason for these laws. They're just bureaucratic artifacts. That's all they are. And law enforcement at the highest level, say the Australian Federal Police, like they know this. I got an email from someone recently the other day who said, yeah, I used to work in high level law enforcement. You know, we were only interested in powders and organized crime, like mushrooms and ayahuasca. That's not on their radar, and they're not interested in that. Why would they be? You know, it's just not like, so yeah, the reason why they're illegal on paper is because of the, you know, Psychotropic Convention 1972 that pretty much all countries abide by. And I think, say, you know, you've got the Czech Republic, all drugs are decriminalized. You've got Portugal, all drugs are decriminalized. Ayahuasca's decriminalized in Peru. But pretty much like there's no country that I know of where they're actually going after people facilitating ayahuasca. I mean, you hear of some shamans in Russia getting in trouble every now and then, but it's not like law enforcement are like, all right, this is like rattling the establishment. You mean at this point, you've got people in America going to Jamaica, taking mushrooms, for example. I don't know if you guys saw the Goop Lab on Netflix with Gwyneth Paltrow and her gang taking mushrooms.
That's where it becomes a bit too, yeah.
Did you watch that?
Actually, I saw parts. I just can't stand her personally. But
right, okay. Oh, she wasn't. It wasn't too bad actually. It was really not too bad at all. I didn't think.
Yeah, it's strange because I see everyone sort of jump on stuff and it's, you know, the new fad and stuff. Like, it was not new fad, but it's for me that there is a big seriousness. And I haven't experienced this, but obviously, Michael, you have, and there's a lot of, like I was saying before, a lot of dark stuff that can come out of this. Like, you know, the worst thing I had was, you know, a reptilian implant that was, you know, like metallic in shape wrapped around all my chakras, right? That was, you know, not traumatic, but, you know, there are some real negative stuff. And we've, you know, been in ceremonies where the whole thing has been quite traumatic from an energy perspective because there's been so much. The people talked about demons and, you know, attachments and all that kind of stuff. Where I've only had just light and lovely journeys and, you know, talking to mystical beings and, you know, all kinds of great stuff, right? And, you know, just a connection of consciousness from a wonderful place. But, you know, there are the negative sides. So.
Yeah. And when you're there, they feel very, very real.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think there is, like what you were saying before, like we are living in this paradigm which is spiritually blind in the West and has been for a long time. We talk about Western culture. Western culture is divorced from indigenous roots. Like I'm sure like people who put up Stonehenge were taking the local mushrooms. 100% they were. But, you know, the European people have been not really having this spiritual insight into the nature of reality. And pretty much all traditional cultures have an understanding of what we would call the dark aspects of reality, or the bad spirits, or the evil entities, or however you want to call them. And so, yeah, people in this day and age, they're having to rediscover that. They're having to look at it and see the shadow material. And, you know, Jung's perspective on the shadow was like individual material but it's not necessarily that I think there can be that like, oh, well, that's just your personal shadow material and you should own that. There is that kind of sort of perspective, which I don't entirely agree with. And I think it's not like that, oh yeah, there's just some things that are dark. I see things in a more organic way, that, humanity is being interfered with, manipulated by, we are being feasted upon. Of course, that our physical flesh is being interfered with, but we are is actually a metro of that is energy that is being harvested and manipulated and controlled by these beings. And
does that sound familiar, Greg?
It can be, if you're not familiar with it, and pretty much none of us are, brought into an awareness of this reality, it's truly shocking and scary to wake up to that. But that's what I was saying before, you go through these processes that are months and even years. When you wake up to reality, like you have these red pill experiences, and it is shocking. But for me now, it's like, after having that awakening, and you can more easily accept reality for what it is, and see it for what it is, and take advantage of what it is, and deal with it as it is, rather than, just shadow boxing with illusion, or living in the mental realm, or in some deluded state. You really, even though the reality you're experiencing, it's like in the Matrix, where the guys on the Nebuchadnezzar, it's often not like a really appealing reality, but it's real, and you know what you're dealing with. And I think a lot of people, they're very much plugged into the Matrix, and they're in this la la land, and they haven't seen not the light. They haven't seen the dark, they haven't awoken into that reality. And when you do, and when you come to terms with it, and when you see it, it's a great relief. It's a great relief, because it is reality. It's not all love and light. That's spiritual bypassing. It's there's reality can be shocking, terrifying, and horrifying. And I think that's, I guess that's a danger. You get, in a way, you're initiated into truth, and truth is absolutely horrifying at times. And and that's just how it is, and we've got to come to terms with it. And that's all right.
Good question for me. I'll move away from that topic. I think we could probably spend a whole hour and a half just on that one. I know I've got a few points I'll raise on that one on the next time we do it. But I'm curious, what's the destination of your work? I mean, you've obviously been in and around this world for quite a long time now, and I hesitate to use the word this renaissance of psychedelics, but there's certainly a curiosity that's starting to take shape. As someone who's experienced in this space, and a leading thinker, and someone that people obviously look to for guidance and advice, have you got a destination, or are you kind of just riding the wave, so to speak?
Yeah, I feel like I've been, pioneering in this space and creating culture, and, I'm going to be looking to create, continue doing that in my life, creating culture and creating new spaces, and, so yeah, there's no real destination in this work for me. I feel like I'm at this point, I'm kind of completing a lot of work that I've been doing for the last couple of decades, and I'm be ready to move on to other things. But it's not like I'm going to leave this work behind, because it's ongoing, and I still have so much interest in researching these plants and developing new forms and working with people. I mean, it's so fulfilling. So I don't think I can ever totally leave it behind.
And is the driver behind that, you have all these wonderful experiences of people having breakthroughs or increasing their awareness, or is it just that you love the evolution of this whole area?
I think one of the primary spaces is really the intersocial space. And especially with this coronavirus thing, I think a lot of people have been, it's really coming to their awareness how important and vital that intersocial space is. It's not, social media isn't really going to cut it to meet your human social and nutritional needs. So I find one of the most potent, valuable things that I do is to create these intersocial spaces where people can really come to terms with their own humanity in a field with other people. So I find that to be incredibly fulfilling, and I find creating those spaces to be very nurturing, and to enable and facilitate that in others. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's magic. And Greg, for us, I guess that was one of the primary drivers behind going down this path ourselves. It's about creating a space where people can, unlock themselves. And there's many paths to do it. We've spoken about Wim Hof and cold therapy and types of breathing, and now plant medicines, and other people through journaling and gratitude. But ultimately, it comes back to this curiosity about who we are, why we're here, what purpose are we trying to fulfill, or any whether we're the spirit having the human experience. And these are conversations that there's often not a space to have them in a really sort of vulnerable, respectful way. And that's, so nice to hear you say that, because that's exactly the type of space we're also trying to create, where you can have these honest conversations and just explore your curiosity of humans, get that childlike curiosity back. Because you just have the best conversations with people when you get into those spaces.
Yeah. I mean, I've been involved in virtual community now, and you guys, you're on my little virtual community, and you can see there, it's like, hey, this community works. Like, there's a sense that there's a sense of flow, and that there's a sense of like optimism and nurturance that people give each other. So I think creating those spaces in the real world and in the the internet world, and really kind of focusing and highlighting these fundamental aspects of community and communication and connection. This is all some of the most fundamental stuff related to what it means to be human. So this is what the plants tell you. And so I think for me, a lot of like where I'm going is further into that realm of interpersonal work.
That was probably, and this is probably a bit hard to actually answer. What's have been some of the biggest insights you've had, or the biggest breakthroughs you've had?
Well, I think probably like what I was saying before, that the real revolution that happened to me, I mean, I was brought up in a kind of like, nominally religious. My parents go to church at Christmas and Easter, but not really religious. I didn't believe in God when I was, I said to my mum I didn't believe in God when I was 9 or something like that. And then think I had, before I started taking psychedelics, there was that awareness of spirit and God and the higher dimensions and all that sort of stuff. But then when I took it, there was that awareness. So I think for a lot of people, that's where you have this firsthand, really intimate firsthand experience of that. So that was the first big one, and the various levels of that. And then I think but also there was awareness of, at various times, just awareness of like the social matrix and how society works in a more mysterious manner that I could explain in many thousands of words maybe, and just understand like the kind of onward march of culture and society and humanity and evolution, sort of understanding that more directly. And then what I was saying before about understanding, not that there's like this dark side per se, but understanding directly the reality of evil and what that means and why it's there and what it's doing and how to work with it and deal with it. So that's an ongoing education. So when you get involved in that, you start meeting the kind of people you would not ordinarily meet. Like I had experiences. I remember one time I had this experience with a guy who was connected to some of the most evil people on earth, and when I drank with him, it was like being strapped to a boat, but it wasn't Willy Wonka at the rudder. It was Satan.
I'm not sure I want to hear.
So it was like kind of being shown, okay, the what do you call it? The heart of darkness, and I think what's happening is that, I think a lot of people have that awareness and that wake up. So that's ongoing as well for me. Because I think that I feel a kind of like how we're living and what we're doing now, it's like, wait on, this is so far from how we could be living and what we could be doing. And we're just molded and we just accept this is how things are. And we accept our institutions and we're just molded into it from a very early age. And it's like, and I think you take psychedelics and you're like, well, it doesn't have to be this way. We can actually do something else. I think that's the kind of like the experience people had in the late 60s that was so threatening to the establishment. But I think now it's important to kind of like go, okay, well, what can we do? Not just go and, live in the forest in a shack with no money, with other people with no money and do nothing and smoke dope. But, how can we actually transform the species? How can we change the situation in a way that transforms it, in a way that it wants, the essential nature of it is realized, So I think that's some of the primary revelations that I've had, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm not sure really how to follow that one up. I think to go from a managed entropy into utopia, kind of like that idea. Although I don't mind the idea of just hanging out in the forest for a little while, escaping some of this craziness that we seem to live through every day.
Well, that's where I am now. I'm in the forest now. Pretty lucky.
Fantastic. Oh, I love it.
Well, let's talk about like you've got a doco Julian, that's in the works as well too.
Yeah, I'm one of these people I'm really not good at giving things names, and I haven't even had a working name for it, but it's pretty much done, and it's on my to-do list. Think of name, and I haven't, and I need to do the titles still, and but it's pretty much done. It's all edited, and but it's going to be a 6-part series, and I interviewed over 50 people in Australia about psychedelics, and I initially thought, yeah, I'll do like a 2-hour. I'll do a 2-hour documentary. If I did a 2-hour documentary with little like 20-minute sound bites from like
a bit like this,
to 15, 20 people, even still, I thought maybe it'll be a 6-part series, 1 hour each. No, it's actually more like 12, 13 hours. It's so I got all the gold, and really collated it together. That's especially related to a lot of the things we've been talking about. So there'll be like 2 hours of people talking about integration. There'll be people talking about the downsides, people talking about like context that'll work for them, people talking about, you know, really deep mystical experiences that they've had, that you just would not hear people talk about, because, you know, there has been some documentaries out there where you hear famous people talking, or, you know, people like, you know, Dennis McKenna talking about their experiences or what have you, but not sort of just lots of different people. So really, I think you can watch this, and it will be available on, hopefully on Vimeo on demand. And people can watch this and really get an education into what these mostly quite experienced people think about contexts and set and setting and integration, and what works for them, what didn't work for them, and just really gives a sense of the distilled wisdom in the Australian scene, because I have a good understanding of what that is. And then I went out and filmed it. And so I think it'll be a good resource for people to tap into, to really have because, you know, there's all these like, you know, scientific articles coming out like, oh, magic mushrooms cure depression, but people don't really know much more than that. Like, so there's some really compelling stories and wisdom in that I've captured. So yeah, I think a lot of people are going to really get a lot out of it.
I can't wait, because the more information out there that is something that people can relate to, the better off it is. I mean, spreading the word about this with so much other, like we were talking before, different agendas at play. It's good to see someone come from just a completely impartial point of view, but also from a wealth of knowledge as well too, right? So it's actually great, especially, you know, if people who are wanting to embark on this or learn about this with every aspect to it, just not the good. It's actually a really, really good project. So kudos to you for doing that, because I know it's been the pipeline for a while. Yeah.
And being able to get a good source of knowledge and learn in a way that, you know, it's probably doing respectfully towards all of the plants and the experiences, not just for marketing and hype reasons, because there's just so proliferation of rubbish on the internet, but, you know, it's all just part of the melting pot, I guess.
Yeah. There's a lot of this kind of marketing hype stuff going on at the moment. Yeah. So yeah, I tried to really collate a lot of the meat, of the real meat, the nutrition, that people can watch it and go, oh, right, okay. And really, hopefully understand what it's all about, and, you know, maybe show it to their mum and dad, and mum and dad can go, oh yeah, right, these people seem all right. They're not like druggy, loser, hippie idiots, you know. They seem like smart people, know what they're talking about. Oh yeah,
that's a good point, because you made
wearing a tie.
You made the point before. It's a very broad demographic, and someone said to me, goes, don't you get addicted to this? And it's like, until you do it, you don't realize you're just going to, you get addicted to, ayahuasca or smoking.
Kind of what I was alluding to before with this synthetic versus natural, because people just have this concept that it's drugs and it's addictive.
And it's like, okay, would you get addicted to doing ayahuasca, every weekend? It's like, if you see me be through a ceremony, you don't want to do that every weekend, right? I mean, but what is the, there is myths around, do you get addicted to it? Because I mean, you do have and there was a great post in your tribe during the week about marijuana and people who smoke that regularly every day, and the very fine line between using it as a spiritual practice versus being an addiction. But yeah, it's what's your opinion on how often should you take it or do it? Is it more of a personal journey? And that thing is about, you're just going to get addicted to
it. Yeah. Well, the only people who are talking about that are people who actually haven't done it themselves.
Correct. Yes.
Because then people who have taken it themselves are like, whoa, okay. Oh yeah, I can't see myself doing this every weekend. I think at one point in South Africa, I noticed there were this little tribe of people who were taking ayahuasca, but they were more taking it socially, like it was like a new pub or bar for them. And they were just not taking a very large amount. And they would take the hape, which is tobacco snuff, and do a lot of that as well. But it wasn't so much addictive. It was just like it was just like, oh, this is what I do now. And I do this every week. So they kind of do that in Brazil as well, in the churches. They just have it do a very light dose. And there's nothing wrong with like doing a light dose, but probably I'd say, look, I guess Terence McKenna would say, like a few times a year it might be good for regular sort of tune up, sort of check in. There's no hard and fast rules, and it depends where you are. I mean, I know some people who taking like a year off or 2 years off need to process all of what they've experienced. And like I said in the beginning, like I know other people as well who are very serious about this, done the same thing I do. They're like just full time, 2-3 times a week. And that's like full scale initiation, or you're pretty much living it all the time. So it really depends where you're at. And some people might just do it and they're like, oh, that's it for me. I'm never doing it again. I don't need to do that. So it's so different depending on each individual.
It's such a different feeling, because I've done, the other side of, I've done the powder drugs when I was younger and in raves and that. And so you get to the point where, that become, the feeling from addiction, because I've got to go and do this, right? When before, ayahuasca or, mushrooms or something, I'm always very nervous. I'm always, oh God, here we go again, right? And it's this thing to get there. So it's this nervousness when, when I was 19, 20, it was like, oh, I just can't wait to get, some, coke into you or something like that, right? So it's such a, like you're saying, the people who ask that question are the ones who haven't done it before.
Yeah.
Because once you do it, you go, I get you now. That's not addictive.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's only, it's addictive in the sense that you're hungry for personal transformation,
Yeah, and that's the difference. If you're doing it, so if I was doing it 2 or 3, it's the healing aspect, the personal transformation, because the end result is good coming out of it, because you change as a person, or the best part of you comes out. So you have a better connection with your family, you have a better outlook on life, you're healthier, you completely transform. Whereas the other types of drugs destroy lives, right? This kind of, the psychedelic experience actually really gives you your life back and everything else, right? So it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, no, I've got some stories of some people in my documentary who were actually drug addicts and used DMT to get off being drug addicts.
Yeah.
So there's no, there's no comparison between them. There's not so much meeting ground, because in one you're having an escapist experience where you're getting off your chops. And the other one, you're having a confrontational experience where you're seeing where you are off your chops and you have to deal with it. It's completely, it's often not pleasant or fun, the actual experience of that self-confrontation, and you're realizing where you're actually, it's like losing an argument really badly.
Just with yourself.
It's quite funny because, Michael and I, obviously, I'm using one with the head in the bucket, throwing my guts up, and he's sitting next to me going, here he goes again. Right. Here he goes.
He's a mess.
And whereas Michael, he doesn't throw up. He just sits there and has a nice journey. Away he goes. And I'm sitting there dribbling down the side of my mouth, and the bucket, well, I can see the bottom of the bucket, and all of a sudden the bucket becomes universe. The universe becomes all expansive. And I'm throwing it all just kind of turns to crap, right? So it's funny how the different experiences just, I don't know how you don't throw up, Michael. It shits me.
No, I made a deal with Andre on that first night. We're looking after each other. As long as I behave, I'll be okay.
So just to really wrap it up, the reality of it is this is a consciousness expanding experience. It really does shift your life. And from my experience, it's just, you come back with a complete different appreciation of life. That you're a spiritual being having a physical life, and it's all just an experience. It's just an experience and an outcome. That's it, right? And you just let go of everything, and just to have that complete, you almost sound aloof in life sometimes, because you just don't care, but you do care deeply. You're just not stuck in the matrix of, this experience, I've done this and that. You just rise above it all, and it is just an amazing shift in consciousness for people sort of who are looking to go deeper into it, because it's not something to be taken lightly. It will smash you, and it will just tear you apart. Like, I've had one where complete ego death and that was traumatic, because you're letting go of everything, right? And it's just like, it's so confronting, where you're sitting there, you go, you've got to let go of your family, and it's like,
hanging on
and just going, but this is what it is. It's, you've got to let go. It's just, but then you let go, and then it's tough, but it is one of the most amazing things you can ever do in your life. But it's challenging.
I think it's going to be get yoga in a couple of decades. Everyone's going to be doing it as much as they're doing yoga.
Julian's,
whether we like it or not, it's starting to go that way already. But I think in this day and age, people, they don't have a jungle. They don't have an edge. They live in this cotton wool world. They don't have they might have their work or whatever, but they don't have a place where they're really truly challenged. And I think in this realm we can really find these really meaty challenges, like someone like Joe Rogan, for example. I mean, he's one of his taglines on Twitter is like psychedelic adventurer, but it's not like he doesn't say, yeah, I took mushrooms last week, in the float tank again. It sounds like it's been a long time. He talks with it. It's not like he's doing it every week or every year. It's not, there's no hurry to get back into. But someone like him, who's really, he's MMA fighter, big tough guy, you really find your edge in that. Wherever you're at, you're going to find your edge, and it's going to be confronting as hell. And I think that's a good thing for all of us, to have that real level of confrontation where we're truly challenged. And, that's a major, major benefit that we can find here. Because, this sort of suburban 9-to-5 lifestyle, it's like, we'll work and relationships and so on.
And then what?
Might be challenging, but not like this. This is like, epic, all right, now the spotlight's on you. You're in the movie and this is for real right now. It's very different.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Well, Julian, this has been awesome. I've got more questions out of this.
So many questions.
So, part 2 will be booked. But look, very much a big appreciation. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Yeah, Julian Palmerism.com is my website. Lots of articles on there.
I thought you were going to say tap into the ether.
Yeah, you try that too. I've got a book as well, which you can buy everywhere. Articulations I wrote, was released 6 years ago. But yeah, it's a very decent guide to psychedelics. So it's it's an underground classic, I reckon.
It'll be part of the school syllabus in about 10 years' time, mate.
So. Yeah, hopefully.
We'll try.
Michael, so Julian, a very big thank you for being part of this.
Outstanding.
Much
thank you,
appreciated.
brother.
So,
no worries. Happy to chat.
Yeah, Michael, thanks for pushing me to actually agree to doing this. But for everybody else, just don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you listen to this via YouTube, if you listen to this via the podcast, subscribe to that as well too. There's a heap more content coming. We'd love to hear your feedback and questions, all that kind of stuff, because that drives some of the stuff that we want to do. We really want to expand the human consciousness in a way that's really positive, because there's a lot happening in the world right now, and the world needs more love and more expansion of consciousness to rise above all this stuff that's happening. But Julian, big thank you, and Michael, thanks for the journey.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you all soon.
We'll chat again another time.